Hello everyone, and welcome to the September 2021 Insights interview. Our VIP guest this month has been leading the operational and strategic development of the Bank of England's payment services, its wholesale banking operations, and the bank's Fintech hub for over 3 years. She's been awarded the Distinguished Professional Award at the Women in Payments EMEA Symposium 2021, and she's a director for the Business Disability Forum. I believe the future of the payments industry will be shaped by our central bankers. So I know you all want to hear from my guest today. Please welcome the Executive Director for Banking, Payments and Innovation at the Bank of England, Victoria Cleland.
Thank you, Tony. Great to have you.
And it's great to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for being happy to open share your insights with our community. At the start of these insights interviews, I like to ask a personal question about how the executives that I'm talking to remain motivated, and what makes them go the extra mile when faced with the challenging jobs that they each have involving stress. And I must say, when I looked at your remit, Victoria, in an institution that's steeped in history, but systemically critically important to our country's future, while also itself going through significant change, I thought, wow, how does she manage to do this? And so I'd love to know, could you share with our members and audience, what is it that continues to motivate you in such a challenging role 30 years after joining the Bank of England?
Oh, it's not quite 30 years, but not far off. And the time has really flown. I think one of the reasons I've stayed at the bank so long and remain motivated is the enormous variety of the roles that I've been able to do. So I'm always doing something new to think about, some new challenge to grapple with. When I first joined the bank, I was looking at how small businesses were financed. I was the graduate recruitment manager for a while. I was private secretary to a deputy governor. I was really heavily involved in the financial crisis and the resolution of Northern Rock. Then work on payments, then banknotes, and back to payments again. So a real variety, which is great. But I think the thing that really keeps me motivated at the bank is just how crucially important everything that we do is, not just to the bank as an institution, but also to the UK financial system and also to the UK public and actually beyond the UK. So I think having a mission that is all about promoting the good of the public of the UK by maintaining monetary and financial stability, that really does give you something to get up for in the morning. It makes an enormous difference. If we get stuff right, it's great. But actually, if we get things wrong, it is very visible. So you need to really drive forward to get that right for everyone in the country.
Yeah, and the particular job you've got, that spans banking, payments, and innovation. What was it that made you think I'd really want to do that job?
The payments thing, I've had a number of roles that have involved payments and actually running the real-time gross settlement system, where we've got over £700 billion a day going through. That is so important to the public. It's so important to financial stability, but actually I've joined it at a time where we're renewing that system. So it's not just the absolutely crucial BAU, but it's a chance to really change and to innovate. But there's a lot more variety in my job as well. So we're responsible for over 150 other banking customers, mainly central banks, but also UK government. We've got the gold custody, which is great fun, going and looking at the gold bars. Also, emergency liquidity assistance. I've recently become responsible for the bank's Fintech hub. So I really enjoy that variety, the challenges, and a real mix of live operations, strategic planning, new programs, new innovation. And I guess above all, I've got a great team, and they're all prepared to go above and beyond. So I certainly feel that I want to as well.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. It sounds like a great role, I've got to say. It sounds very exciting. So you've must have seen a great deal of change. You're a champion of change. We talk about, you've been mentioning already, innovation, new things. You've said the word new several times. What are the main things that you think have changed since you joined, and what are the things that are driving that change?
Since I joined the bank or this area.
Probably the bank. Yeah, what are the things you've seen?
Yeah, no, I mean, it has changed phenomenally. I think the fact that we're doing this interview here and I'm sitting at home is a really big step forward. So the last sort of 18 months have seen phenomenal change just in the way that we work. But in
Yeah.
terms of the bank itself, I mean, I joined as a new graduate and it was a very different feeling place. It's now very much more diverse in terms of both what we do, but also the people who are there. It's become more informal. It was never unfriendly. I mean, it was always a very sort of welcoming place with a real buzz and people with their hearts set on what they wanted to achieve. But we have become a lot more open and inclusive, both in terms of to our own staff, but also outwardly looking. So I think we're much more in the public eye with a broader remit. I think it's really important that we are there very much sort of accountable to the public, that we are transparent. So we do a lot more publicly than we would ever have done before. And also we want people to understand what we do. We don't want to be sort of mysterious central bankers. So we spend quite a lot of time actually thinking about how to encourage school children to understand more about economics, finance. So I've been to quite a few schools giving presentations on what the bank does. We are involved in social media, which is something one would initially not have thought we would have been. So when we launched the £10 note, for example, we actually used Snapchat for some of that. So I think the way that we transact has changed, but actually the bank's remit has changed considerably since I joined in the early 90s. I think the biggest thing is the bank now has independence to set interest rates. When I first joined, it was what some of your listeners may recall as the Ken and Eddie show. But
Yes, that's true.
Which was very different. And then in 1997, the Bank of England was given independence to set interest rates. We've now got the Monetary Policy Committee. So that's a very different approach, greater independence. Supervision was part of the bank when I joined. It then moved off to the FSA, and now it's come back to the bank, but with more supervision. For example, insurance, we've now got remits in relation to climate change. So the bank's remit has changed considerably. Our use of technology has changed considerably as well. But overall, mission and ethos are exactly the same.
It's curious, though, that not many other central banks seem to have followed the lead that you've set. I think this is a very progressive statement you just made about being much more open and inclusive, and yet other central banks don't seem to have followed that lead. I know certainly several European banks that are still very closed and very reluctant to engage with their various stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, we feel it's incredibly important, and we are here as the Central Bank of the UK, and yes, the main building. When we're not in lockdown, everyone is in. Yeah. It's in London, but we've actually got agents around the country whose main role is to go and talk to businesses in a whole range of areas, including the devolved nations, to really have a finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening there as well. Andrew Bailey, the governor, he goes on sort of regional visits. At the moment, they're mainly virtual, but it's very important that the bank is out there engaging with people, helping them to understand what we do. So much about central banking is around trusts. I mean, particularly if you think about sort of even school level economics and inflation expectations, you need to trust that institution. And if they don't know what we're saying, it's harder to gain that trust.
So one of the things that we've also noticed is to do with the composition of the leadership of the bank. And it's brilliant. I was just checking online to see who's on the top team. And it's pretty nearly 50-50 men and women. That is certainly a huge change over the last 30 years. What's been behind that? Has it been a kind of conscious decision, or is it just what's happened because you appointed the best people to the role?
It's a mix, and I think ultimately you've always got to have the right person for the role, but the bank has put a really increased focus on diversity and inclusion, and I think it's really important that you get both of them together. But that really has been a key priority probably for the last nearly 10 years. It's a strategic priority at the moment. It's something that Court, who are our board, feel very passionately about. They recently sort of launched a court review on ethnicity. And so from the Bank of England, having diversity is really crucial to us. We want a diverse workforce. As I was saying earlier, we represent sort of the public of the UK. So we need in our sort of staff to be able to reflect that mix. Also, we absolutely want to get the best outcomes. So we want to move away from groupthink. So you need a diverse mix of people, and it is the right thing to do to give everyone these opportunities. I mean, you mentioned gender, which is very important, and yet great strides have been made at that very senior level. There's still more that we want to do, but we also, to my mind, need to think about diversity in diversity, if that makes sense. So there's a big focus on gender, increasing focus on BAME. I'm actually the executive sponsor of the bank's disability network, so I think we really need to consider that. Also, sexual orientation, think about social mobility as well. And so what the bank is trying to do is to really think across that whole spectrum of diversity and what we can do. At the moment, we've got targets around ethnicity and gender. I want to get to a stage where we have got targets around disability, sexual orientation as well. We need more data to enable us to do that. But to get back to your question, was it a conscious? There's a lot of work has been done to really sort of try and get a better balance of diversity while still making sure we've got the right people to do the jobs. One of the things we have now, for example, is a sponsorship program where the executive directors and governors actually sponsor an individual from, they could be sort of a woman, it could be a BAME person, it could be someone with a disability, it could be something else, to really try and give them those opportunities to build up that networking that they might not necessarily have, and to really help them understand where their career is going. We take a pooled approach to senior level recruitment, so head of division and above now, rather than just making each individual decision as it comes along. We try and have a pooled round that the governors and the executive directors are involved in, saying, okay, you've got 6 roles to fill. Does this look like the right mix? Actually, if we juggle that around, have we actually thought broadly enough about the pool? Clever. We have name blind recruitment, so really trying to take out any bias there, and a lot of work on the bank in terms of unbiased training and things like that. But it's partly giving people the opportunities, it's about giving them the confidence, it's about making sure people sort of names do get on lists rather than always going to the same person. But it takes time, and we've got further to go, but real progress has been made over the last few years.
I think you're showing an excellent example to the rest of the industry. We try very hard, for example, at a very simple level, to get a pretty even balance of gender on our speaking agendas for our conferences. But it's still hard because the senior executives in the payments industry are still too weighted towards being, they're certainly not balanced in terms of men to women. So I was going to ask you what sort of things we can do, but you've actually answered quite a lot of the things that I would be doing around name blind recruitment, having a balanced pool of selection and things like that. Is there any one thing that you think the payments industry should do differently to ensure that it is more diverse and inclusive?
I think role models can be really important. So showing people actually, regardless of what background you've got, where you can get to. I mean, one of the things that the Bank of England looks at very carefully, there is a speaker request. We will be very keen to understand who else is on that panel. And to be blunt, if you're inviting a man to an all-male panel, we'd say, this doesn't look right. We want you to have diversity. So there's an element where we can try and do that. But I think, I mean, on one level, I think the payments industry is far more advanced than some other bits of the financial sector. There are specific women in payments groups and things, and some of those panels are more diverse than normal. But I think it's keep celebrating those successes, let people speak, even if they're not naturally the most sort of boisterous speakers, but let them be heard and put a real weight on what people say rather than how they say it. I think is important.
Yeah, very good tips. Thank you. I've got to say, it sounds like a great place to work. I would like to. I'd like to move on and ask you a little bit about your role. The Bank of England is partway through a major multi-annual process to renew the 25-year-old RTGS
Yep.
infrastructure, and you're in charge, I think. Is that right?
That's right. Yep, I'm
Few.
certainly in charge. Yeah.
So our listeners, I'm sure, will be dying to have an update on what is, without doubt, a hugely exciting progressive program, a lot at stake. Can you talk us through some of the key steps to that project, please, Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the current system is 25 years old. In fact, we had a virtual birthday party for it back in April, which was the absolute 25th anniversary of the RTGS system. So it's definitely time to change it and really make sure we're sort of up to date in terms of technology. So the real rationale for changing it is to enhance resilience. As a central bank, resilience is absolutely key to what we do. For something as financially systemic as the RTGS system, that's core. So we knew we wanted to upgrade it to increase resilience. But we also thought there is an opportunity to do more here. So there was a lot of engagement with industry at the early stages. And actually, this was before I joined. And in 2017, published a blueprint, which was based on what industry wanted and what we thought was needed. So at the heart of it, increased resilience, but also trying to push forward innovation and competition. So another sort of key objective was increasing access. So we've already opened up access to non-bank payment service providers.
Brilliant.
But as part of the new system, we're going to make it easier to join, which should attract more. And we've increased the capacity of the system, which should enable yet more players. So more players should lead to competition, also helps financial stability.
That is brilliant. The fact that you're opening up that access is so important. We've, as a community, been fighting for that for years. We think it's so important. We've, as a community, been fighting for that for years. We think it's been a missed opportunity in the past, but it sounds like you're designing that access into the future, which is really superb.
Yeah, it's important. It's also something we're trying to promote with other central banks, for example, through the work on cross-border payments, because I think if you want to enhance cross-border payments, having greater access to systems will be important. So we're increasing resilience, we're increasing access, we're enhancing interoperability, mainly through introducing ISO 20022 messaging and thinking about how we interact with pay.uk, MPA when it comes along. So actually the two systems can talk really easily to each other. We're looking at greater user functionality. So can we get more effective liquidity saving mechanisms, introducing better data, introducing APIs. So really trying to think how will the user want to interact with this system, and also enhancing what we call the end-to-end risk management of the system. So back in 2017, CHAPS, the wholesale payment system, came in-house to the Bank of England. So now we run RTGS and CHAPS, and we can look at the interlinkages there to make sure they're as robust as possible, but also we can get further down the track into the main sort of direct participants of CHAPS and some of their key suppliers. So it's that end-to-end side. So it's ambitious.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it. Is it on track? Is it on track?
Yeah, it's on track. And I'll just sort of go through the main sort of things that we're aiming for. So we've got our overall vision, and to deliver that, we've broken it down into a number of stages. We've done a lot of really important work in terms of recruiting a technology delivery partner to work with us. So at the moment, we're heavily involved in the actual development of the new system. Then in June 2022 is the first big public milestone where we introduce ISO 20022 messaging on a like-for-like basis. So making sure that you've got the data in the right order, but not adding in any new enhanced data quite yet. Then in February 2023, we'll move to enhanced ISO, so including this extra data. And then in autumn...
So what extra data?
So this is really trying... With ISO, it's a harmonized messaging system globally, and it enables you to put a lot more information that might help, for example, with anti-money laundering. So more information about where the payments come from, what that payment is for. But that needs a big change, and it needs people who are sending the information and receiving the information to both have that capability and to be ready. There is a big global sort of move towards ISO at the moment. A number of countries already moved. The Bank of England is going summer 2022.
Yeah.
The ECB is moving in November 2022. SWIFT is moving more in November 2022. So the feeling is that until some of those other big players are ready to send this enhanced messaging, so more information, it isn't right for the Bank of England to be demanding it or getting its members to send it, because you'll have a slight mismatch. So that's why we're splitting up the like for like. So let's use the ISO messaging standards, so we're getting it in the right format and the right order, but don't put any new exciting information in until February 2023.
I'm going to ask a cheeky question. And part of me fully understands and relates to where you're coming from. And part of me is in the impatient Labrador puppy-esque type. Come on, why does this all take so long? Our industry is full of innovation. We talk about agile development. We talk about, let's look at fast-moving innovation. And the paper that is the architecture behind this was published 4 years ago. We're still a year away in 2017, as you mentioned, and we're still in the build phase. Why is it taking so long?
Yeah, no, happy to answer that. It was the first question I asked when I started the job. And then I'll very quickly say that, so the two ISO moves are really important. Then the sort of at the real heart of what we're doing is in autumn 2023, when we sort of essentially switch over to a new core ledger. So you're taking out the heart of the old system, putting in the new. So why does it take so long? Partly because it's not just the Bank of England that needs to be ready. We need the whole of industry to be ready and to take them along the journey with us. It isn't something that we wanted to think, oh yeah, this is what the industry will want, we're just going to do it. So some of the initial work involved a lot of collaboration, and we've kept testing those ideas all the way along to say, okay, you said you wanted this, and it's a bit like saying, oh yeah, I want a car, and then, oh, so what coloured car do you want? Are you sure you want that? And you gradually refine things as you go along to make sure you're building what is wanted. It is a incredibly important system. It's not one where we can take any risks during the development, so there is a phenomenal amount of testing. We also think very carefully about the resilience of it, so working closely with the National Cybersecurity Centre in terms of cyber resilience and things, so always making sure that we've got the best state of the art in terms of what we're doing. And then a lot of time is spent engaging with industry. We're now monitoring whether or not they are going to be ready on time. So we've got about 36 direct participants of chaps. They all need to be ready. They've all got their own programs and staff. So I think it's because it is, and I think the other reason is we have to go for a big bang. So an RTGS system is really the core ledger. That is the absolute truth in terms of whose money is where does it all go. And so everyone needs to move at once. You can't say, oh, well, we'll just do a pilot and then we'll sort of gradually expand. It's all or nothing. And I think that's what makes this different. That's why it's different to some other developments where, like, oh, we'll roll out the system and as a pilot for one area and then change it. It has to be everything, and the whole industry needs to be there ready as well.
And we're talking about 700,000 million a day, aren't we? 700 billion a day. And so kind of you can't afford to make a mistake with this one, really.
No.
So, I do, now you've answered the question. I do understand. And what are you looking for from us, from the payments industry, from the people listening to this? What do you want from us?
So for the actual direct participants in chaps and key players in RTGS, I'm afraid, need you all to be ready, because ISO will mean a change. The new core settlement engine will mean a change. So we've got quite a significant industry engagement program, some of it sort of bilateral, some of it we have a regular big forum and newsletters. But for those participants who really need to be changing their own systems, we've got a fairly in-depth monitoring and assurance process. So we're getting information saying, are you ready? Red, amber, green. What internal audit reports? Can you show us for some of the really big players who are actually getting some external assurance done? So it's making sure that their systems are ready, and also talking to their customers about the move to ISO, the types of information that will be needed. So I think it is awareness and encouraging people to stop and think, what does this mean for you? Anyone who's got to make a significant change will know that by now, and we're engaging very closely with them. But it's sort of letting that information sort of trickle down to indirect participants and people as well.
And making sure they're ready. That's a very good message. Now, one of the things that I've found fascinating about this industry, and we talk about the things that drive growth, and we think of the three things: the changing technology, the changing consumer behavior and habits and demands, and changing regulation. I've often felt that regulation is a key part of the success of our industry, payments specifically. But I'm increasingly aware that standards are the things that are going to enable the interoperability, the ability to plug and play, to move stuff easily with low friction, instantly at low cost. But I wonder whether standards such as ISO have been sort of seen as, if you like, a bit of this poor relation to regulations. All the focus is on how the regulator is going to regulate and how they're going to supervise. Do you think we should be attending a little bit more to the importance of standards? And what would you say if you were to be asked, how important is the transition to ISO 20022, partly for your RTGS, but for other purposes too?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ISO 20022 is really transformational, and it's something. It is a standard, and yes, everyone needs to sort of abide by the standard in a similar way to which one might need to abide by regulation. But like regulations, it is here with a sort of real purpose and value. And I think with ISO, one of the main things I'd encourage your listeners to do is actually think, what does it deliver? How can that help me, rather than thinking, oh no, it's another thing I've got to tick off the list and do. And so I think there's some real benefits from that harmonisation. So I think at the moment over 70 countries have already adopted ISO 20022. There's now a big push for more and larger countries to do it. So it makes it much easier to exchange messages across borders. One of the things we're doing in the UK is actually working very closely with pay.uk and delivering a sort of common credit message so we're using very similar formats for NPA when it comes on board and for chaps. And one of the reasons behind that is, if there was, for example, a problem with faster payment, we would then find it much easier to route the messages out of faster payment and into chaps. They'd need to be bundled up. But if you've got systems talking essentially, if you think of it a bit like a similar language, if those systems are talking the same language, that makes it much easier to share information globally between systems.
Yes.
ISO will provide a lot more information, so it'll give greater insights into customers, into issues such as AML, which will be helpful. One of the big problems with payments, particularly cross-border at the moment, is the need for manual intervention. I think well over 50% of cross-border payments need manual intervention. If you've got the same messages and they can go straight through processing, that saves time, that saves money. Richer data. And so I think if people understand, I've got all this information, what can I do with it? How can I learn? How can this help me to better shape the products for my customers? So there's a lot of benefit there.
Do you think that we should, as technology leaders, be looking at the application of artificial intelligence as to how to use the data, particularly around things like cross-border, more intelligently? And as you say, if 50% is involving a human being, if we can have a computer that's got artificial intelligence rather than real intelligence, because it's learning, because it's able to make more intuitive decisions, do you think that's something we should be investigating and investing in?
It's certainly worth looking at. And I mean, AI is taking off incredibly across a whole range of areas in finance. There are a whole load of sort of issues to look at in terms of some of the ethics around it as well. But for something like this, it's certainly got real potential. I think one of the issues, of course, with AI is it's only as good as the information that's put into the system.
Yes.
And so I think ISO would almost help that, because you have got standard information in standard formats and standard language. So it would almost make it easier to use AI. I mean, for our new RTGS system, we're looking at how best to use APIs to enable members to interrogate data, and actually there's a big push on APIs for cross-border payments as well. So if you could actually start, and it goes back to your earlier question actually, Tony, if you could actually start having more global standards for APIs as well, because what you really want to do is to sort of take away all of these frictions and differences.
And you know, from the Brunel's Railway in the very early days, where there were different gauges for trains going to Bristol compared to going to Manchester, you know, you've got to have the stuff on the same rails that the trains don't have to change their width for. So, okay, very good. So let's go. Can we go back to talking a little bit more about you?
Yes.
Please. I'm sure the audience will be interested in learning. You know, you were a graduate from PPE in Oxford, an MBA at Imperial College. Can you give us one or two particularly challenging things that you faced, and also perhaps something you're particularly proud of achieving?
Yeah, I mean, the lots of challenges, and actually building a real-time gross settlement system that's going to be resilient enough for everyone and quick enough for you, Tony. That's a big challenge. I think that looking back on my career, one of at the time the most sort of challenging elements was when I was working on the Northern Rock team. So at the time, at the time that the queues started forming outside Northern Rock, the Bank of England sort of set up a team, and I was on that, really trying to think what can we do here? How do we make sure that depositors' money is safe? Because it was unprecedented. People didn't really understand what was happening. Enormous queues, which could lead to sort of lack of confidence in other institutions. So working on that team to try and think what can be done, what is the toolkit there, because there wasn't, for example, any way to resolve a financial institution other than just, well, you can put it into normal insolvency, which doesn't work because you need to get the depositors' money out quickly. So it's like there isn't much of a toolkit, but there are people who need their money, and we need to keep confidence in the system. And there was stuff all over the press.
Wow.
And so we were working very much in the sort of media eye, knowing that we needed to do something quickly. And in the end, Northern Rock was put into what became temporary public ownership. There were sort of various steps along the way and potential sales and things. So that was moving quickly in completely unprecedented, uncharted territories, working with an enormous bunch of sort of external experts helping us along the way, and knowing that you absolutely had to get it right. So that was exciting, but challenging both mentally and physically. There was long hours.
Yeah, you didn't have 5 years either, did you? It had to be done. It
had to be done. Yeah, we didn't even have 5 months. So it was quick.
And about something you're proud of achieving.
Yeah, I mean, signing the banknotes on behalf of one's country just has to come at the top of the list. That was a fantastic job. But actually, it was more than that, because I was leading the team at the time that we moved from paper to polymer. And actually some of the issues that we've just touched on here in terms of industry readiness were just as important there. So it was absolutely fantastic work with the design teams and getting the security features and things. But it wasn't just us having the notes ready. We needed the industry to be ready to accept the notes. And that isn't just the sort of banks, but also we needed to be sure that if somebody, the day the polymer note came out, wanted to buy a train ticket, parking ticket, were those machines updated? So I think that actually moving from, shall we have polymer, to here is polymer, and it is literally coming out of the ATMs and going into machines. That was probably one of the biggest changes, and then RT2 will be the next biggest change.
I've got to say that that's a very nice tangible thing, and also it's something that everybody can relate to. Because they can have seen that, saw the transition and they've experienced it, and it was done in a way that was extremely sensitive and thoughtful, and I suppose full of risk around what people might have misinterpreted about the move to polymer and what its implications were. And no, it's good. And of course, we're in a world where cash is being increasingly less used for payments. So let's move on a little bit now to just, I suppose, penultimate question for you is you're aware of the EPA has an advisory board of chief executives and senior and very experienced business people who support my team to ensure that we are giving the right sort of content and direction and guidance to the 150 members that we have on board. And so what would you what advice would you have for me and the advisory board as we're going on this journey, this extraordinary journey of actually quite rapid and transformational change? What sort of tips would you give to us?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There is a phenomenal amount of change in the payments industry at the moment. And I don't know, even a decade ago, payments was just sort of something that went on in the background and people didn't talk about it. But now it is very much talked about. I think a significant proportion of the fintech firms are actually focused on payments. So there's a lot changing. It's potentially a pivotal moment for payments. And I think there is so much going on. I think the main thing I'd say is to try and focus on what are the really big issues and where you can make a difference. Lots of people are out there horizon scanning, speculating, will this happen, won't it? But it's like, can you find some of those areas where big decisions need to be made now or action is necessary? And yeah, slight plug for our work, I guess. But so helping your members to be ready for big change. So it's not just the Bank of England that's renewing its system, but as I say, ECB bringing in ISO next autumn and SWIFT, other central banks having big sort of overhauls of their payment system. So helping your members to be not just ready for that, but to really make the most of that opportunity and say, okay, this change is happening. How can I really get it to benefit me? So I think those big changes. Another area that's very topical at the moment is around enhancing cross-border payments, and I was involved in some work in the G20 agenda. So at the moment, there is a lot of focus on that, setting the targets, and you help run a really useful workshop with some of your members on that. But there's a chance at the moment to really influence that agenda, the questions about what should the targets be, what is best practice, what does the private sector need to do? Do you, for example, want increased operating hours? So I think this is something that you can really feed in and shape. And the other thing is perhaps thinking about, well, it's really important work that you do in terms of bringing people together, but helping to understand what those interlinkages are and making sure everyone can learn from each other. Yes, payments on one level, it is a competitive space and people will have their own business angles, but actually payments is also something where you get benefit from network effects, and you need the industry to be together. You need them to be moving in the right direction on these big strategic things. There's tactical stuff they can do separately, but well,
that's very, very helpful guidance. And certainly I believe that connecting the future is something that we're responsible for, is bringing people together and ideas and capabilities and opportunities. And actually it also, in a strange way, it gives us a sense that we're collaborating to make a difference in how the world works. And both the economic side, financial side, but that has an impact on society as well. So I'm excited to hear your advice and thank you for those tips. Last question: what advice would you give to a new graduate who approached you thinking about following in your footsteps?
Well, I mean, I've had a fantastic career.
It's a long pause.
Yeah. It was where to start, because I've had a fantastic career. I mean, I've done jobs that I never really knew were there. I mean, I didn't think, I could go and sign banknotes. It's unique. I think the main things I'd really encourage someone to do are to understand what type of things they enjoy doing, and that's as much in terms of the types of skills that they like using. It could be working with animals. I can see a cat going across.
Sorry, this is the most affectionate cat I know, but he has to pop off. Off you go.
So really try and think, what are the types of things you enjoy doing in terms of skills? So do you like juggling lots of different things with tangible outcomes? Do you prefer sort of shutting yourself in a dark room and writing sort of very helpful, detailed policy papers? Do you like engaging with others? Do you like leading team. So try to think about those skills and choose something that you enjoy, but also something that you believe in. And I think that's what I've really kept motivated at the bank, because I really believe in what we're doing is important. And also, I think you have to work hard if you're going to sort of really make a difference, and you need to work well as part of a team. Respect all your colleagues, make all your colleagues feel included, because that makes a much better and sort of team and output. And you never know who will pop up where again, and
That's
someone you
true.
might be in a team with, you could end up working with at a later point. So sort of really get on with people as best you can, but most of all, be true to yourself. There's no point going for a job interview pretending to be something that you're not, because you can't keep up that facade for 30 or so years. So yeah, something you enjoy, something you believe in, and sort of be true to yourself in delivering it are the main things.
Superb tips and advice. Wise words. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for sharing so much of your stuff about you and your work and the importance of it. I've got to say, it's the most exciting time that I think we've been in ever in our industry.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to have your leadership. You're a great role model to all of us, and we really appreciate your time. Please, on behalf of the audience and our community, thank you very much indeed, Victoria Cleland, who is the Executive Director for Banking, Payments and Innovation at the Bank of England. Victoria, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Tony, and hello to the cat.
Thanks so much. Speak to you soon.